And so, at a very high level, IFS teaches us that we all have this core authentic, what IFS calls our self. In Christendom, we would refer to that as the God image within us or the imago Dei, but it's who we truly are. And that essence inside of us is always present and it is never broken or damaged in any way. And that is designed to be the leader of our inner system. And then we all have many different positive parts. All parts of us are good, which is kind of an amazing concept. And all of the different constellation of parts that we each have make up our unique personalities. But when difficult things happen in life, or if we've had a traumatic childhood, or any type of a difficulty, even if it's not an obvious, quote, trauma, anything that might overwhelm our capacity at the moment to cope, it creates burdens that cover over our positive parts, these positive essences of our parts. And those parts then take on distorted roles. And there's basically three kinds of parts. You can almost think of it. C. Sykes is a wonderful IFS expert in addiction, and she sort of teaches this as envisioning ourselves on almost a triangle, an upside down triangle. So the God image or the self is at our core. At the bottom part of the triangle are what IFS calls our exiles. Those are the vulnerable parts of us that initially get burdened with painful situations, and they carry all of our negative core beliefs. I'm all alone. There's something wrong with me. I'm powerless. I'm not safe. If you really knew me, you wouldn't love me. All of those parts of us that are very tender and very vulnerable, that everything in our system tries to keep exiled. That's why they're called the exile. They drive all the behavior of all the other burdened parts, which is why it's so important to eventually get to them and help them heal so the rest of these burdened parts can heal. The other two kind of clusters of parts in our system are called managers and firefighters, and their whole job is responding to the pain of the exiles. If you think about the managers as being up on that top left-hand corner of the triangle, their whole job is to try to run our lives so we never get triggered and feel the pain of our exiles. So these are burdened parts with jobs like perfectionism, people pleasing, not using my voice, my inner critic, the judge, all of these types of parts that restrict sexually or with food. And they try to run our lives so that we meet with success and connection and we don't have to feel the pain of our exiles. But because they're burdened, they're not the God image doing that. They're burdened parts. They will fail. Our exiles get triggered and take us over. And because that feeling of being alone or powerless or broken is so overwhelming and unmanageable, the firefighters jump in to try to make it better. And think about them on that top right-hand corner. And those are all the addictions: self-harm, dissociation, suicidality, homicidality, binge eating, all the things. So you have these kind of three clusters of parts, and what we tend to do in our lives and in sobriety is we just chase around that triangle. So the managers run our lives most of the time and try to keep our lives functioning. They eventually fail, and we get what we call in addiction work triggered, which means the exile takes over and creates this intense emotional state, which triggers the firefighters, who then take over and try to put the fire out. And after they've done whatever it is that they do, drink, look at porn, have sex with prostitutes, whatever it is that the firefighters are doing, the exiles are in more pain. They feel more worthless, more powerless, more helpless, which makes the managers have to work harder, which drives this never-ending cycle around and around the triangle, until eventually the exiles are in so much pain that a manager takes charge and says, okay, firefighter that's acting out sexually, we're locking you in the basement. That's sobriety. You got to go. And we can't get rid of any parts of ourselves, and we don't actually want to, because they all have inherently positive qualities. It's their burdened jobs that are the problem. It's the burdens or the trauma that is the problem, not the parts themselves. If all we do is get a really strong manager part of us that says, you got to get sober, and forces the firefighters to stop, couple of things are going to happen. Number one, we haven't done anything to address the pain that the exiles are in. And so we are going to continue to be in every bit as much pain, even if that particular firefighter is locked in the basement. And because that's the case, they're going to recruit other firefighters to stand in the gap. And this is why if you walk into a typical 12-step meeting and sit down next to your buddies who are sober from fill in the blank, alcohol, you have to walk through a cloud of smoke to get in the meeting, stand in line to get a cup of caffeine, and sit down next to your friends who've all gained 20 pounds. And the reason is because the smoking, the caffeine, the overworking, the eating, all of that has to amp up because we haven't addressed the pain. So what we've really done is we've rearranged the deck, the chairs on the Titanic, but we haven't plugged the hole. And if we don't do that, the pain is going to come out in a different way. And eventually what we see a lot in addiction recovery is we have chronic relapse. And that's not the only reason for chronic relapse, but it's one of the most common. We've tried to plug the hole in the ship, we've tried to rearrange the deck chairs, and we haven't done anything about the gaping hole in the bottom of the ship. So that's kind of a little illustration of how internal family systems sees the work. And what we want to do in the healing process is bring the God image to all of those different parts of us in order to help them heal. When that happens, the whole system transforms, and that regular compulsion to act out in some way is able to be released and no longer carried inside of us.